So there are four basic entry points of expenditure within the Educare Finance module. The first is the requisitions. The second is through direct postings. The third is the salary advance, and the fourth is the payroll. Of course, salary is, of course, an offshoot of the payroll service. For us to be able to handle all that, first, let's start with the requisitions. Requisitions is what other people would term voucher or voucher system, where you place a request, a voucher is raised, and then you make entry to those voucher, and then someone signs on it, provides the money, and then you take it to wherever you are supposed to spend it, right? In our system, we call it requisitions, and these requisitions are offshoots of a budget. Therefore, for us to handle requisitions, we can only start with budget management. If you look at requisitions at the moment, you see there is no activity and there is really nothing you can do with it. But the moment you set up a requisition, I mean a budget for any of the sessions or account financial year of interest, then requisition becomes active. So let's see how budget management works. In the budget management menu, you will find budget items and list of budgets. Budget items refer to those categories or item groupings that you would want to make budgets against. And you can see things like electricity bill, building expenditure, diesel stationery, and all that as samples. Others may have things like entertainment, office, CEO expenses, office expenses, and everything. This is where you create your budget listings. That is the items that you will be budgeting or you will be placing requisitions against. Now, the idea of using a budget is to track your expenditure. If you have a budget of 500,000 naira for electricity bills, you want to know how it was spent and also be able to make a projection of what should be needed next based on how it was spent this year or this financial section or something like that. We will also show you within the system the schematics of every budget, what we um, what we look at as the analysis, the budget analysis. We will see all that within the budget. Speaking of the budget itself, we use the second tab, the list of budgets, to actually create a budget and then key in some budget entries or budget items within that particular budget um, instance. And then when requisitions are being placed, this budget instance is being watched. So the system pays attention to it and watches it as it depletes, right? So we'll see all that in a moment. For ease of understanding, I've reduced the list to just 5 items by just deleting some of them. We're going to delete one more just for the sake of knowing how to delete. It's as simple as click delete and you have it deleted, except where it is already engaged. We will also see that when we engage some of them. Now, to create a new one is simple. Just click on the plus button at the top right of the table and then enter the budget item name. For instance, we're going to enter food, drinks, and refreshment. Now, the next thing you notice is that every budget item is attached to an account chart, that is, chart of account. Of course, you recall that we already have all our accounts charted properly in the chart of account menu right here. So the next question is, what chart of account does this particular item belong to? So you will have to open this up and then select where it belongs to. Maybe there is actually um, a feeding or food or entertainment. Yeah, right there. Feeding and entertainment expenses chart of account. So you attach this particular item to it. The idea is that when this item is created, any requisition made against this particular item, when you go to the chart of account or ledger, it will be recorded against feeding and entertainment expenditure in the chart of account. It's as simple as that. So now we have 5 items that we would want to make budget around. Now let's see how to create a budget. Creating a budget is also very, very simple. This is the tab, list of budgets. And as you can see, we don't have any at the moment. To create a new one, first of all, it has to be on an active financial year. 2024, 2025 is our current financial year. And then you click on the plus button at the top right again. You will find this very often in most of the peak of the financial management. Most of the create buttons are usually on the top right. So here again, we have already clicked on, we've already opened up our list of budgets. First of all, this is the list of budgets. It's empty right here. Now, for us to create a new one, we just click on the plus button and then we enter the budget title. The budget title is usually as simple as maybe the session or the financial year. So you can easily say 2024 first quarter budget, or 24 annual budget. As simple as that. So you decide how long you want your own to run, but here you have it as, excuse me, budget. You have it as simple as that, just a budget title. Now, usually for the sake of comparison, you want to know, okay, what's the estimated revenue. Okay, so the estimated revenue is usually maybe something that spans from your maybe income last year and what the number of maybe students you have in your system, or the number of invoices that you expect to vend this particular um, year, and so on and so forth. So right now, let's assume that we are expecting a total income of 2 million, and then you say, you answer the next question: approved budget. What's your budget for the year? Together, I want us to spend just 1 million in this particular tutorial. So, approved budget 1 million. Opening date, you choose the date you want it to start. So, usually, you want it to start at the beginning of the session or the financial year. But right now, we're going to just make it start today for the sake of this tutorial. And then we save the budget instance. The moment you save the budget instance, the system will open the list of budget items for you to now list them in vis-a-vis spending the 1 million that you have created as what you have budgeted. So what do you do next? You open up the chart categories. Remember, we have only 5 items in our budget items setup. You can see all of them here. One thing you will note in a moment now is that any item here that we do not include in this budget list will not be available in our requisition pro forma. We will see that because I'm going to leave PHC bill uncontained. So here I'm going to enter printing and stationery. So inside printing and stationery as a category, we have only one budget item, stationery. So we can just add it up. Now, let me show you something about the categorization. Remember we created printing and stationery, right? We created PHCN bill and other administrative expenses, right? And under the budget items setup right here, when we were creating it, we chose the chart of account, printing and stationery. As simple as that. Now, in the budget listing, that is this particular budget, when we are keying in the contents of this printing and the printing and stationery, it will take only that stationery or any other item that is attached to that printing and stationery. Simple. So here we have stationery, and let's say we want to spend only 120,000 naira on it. So we check it and then we put the amount. The next thing you notice is that the current actual spending will be increasing while the current balance will be decreasing from the 1 million naira that we have budgeted. So let's see the next item that I want to add to the list: other administrative expenses. And here we have only legal fees. So we click on legal fees and then we add an amount. Let's say I'm adding 200,000 naira this time around. So you see again, the actual spending is increasing and the current balance is decreasing until you hit that your expected amount. So here, telephony, let's add 400,000 naira to it, and feeding expenditure, let's add the rest to it. So we have two. Now look at it. If I say 290,000 naira, the system goes red. It's a flag telling you that your current extra spending is already above over budget by 10,000 naira. So it's now your discretion. It's not like the system will stop you from going ahead, but it's your discretion to either leave it like that or bring down the budget to match your expected, your estimated, your approved budget. Now, with the moment you have done all these, you notice that every entry you check here and put a number to adds to your budget summary on the right flank. So here we have a total of 1 million naira and there is no balance. That means that we have actually indicated that we want to spend everything here. We want to spend the 1 million by spreading it across these items here, just these four items. I remember I said I will leave one out, PHCN. I left it out. We have electricity bills, but I didn't add it to this. I want us to use that as an example of a an ignored budget item category and how requisition reacts to it. Okay, so I'll simply click on the check button, the save button, and the budget will be saved. Estimated budget 1,000, 1 million. Approved 1 million. Actual spending 0 and currently inactive. And when you click on it, either by clicking on the status or by clicking on view, the system shows you the current standing of all the budget categories, of all the items within that particular budget instance. So this is the budget summary tab. And then this is the variance analysis tab. The variance analysis tab shows you the current standing for each one. Of course, you said you are starting in December, so the system gives you a 1 year spread of that's your budget. So currently, this is the budgeted amount, and currently there is no actual spending. So the budget amount is exactly the same as the budget variance. So there is no forecast. There is no forecast variance. This is the full budget summary breakdown, the variance. But this is now the item-based variance. Items in the sense that those budget items, those items that you added to the budget, are being tracked individually. So the idea here now is that you can actually look at electricity bill or stationery and say, for the month of December, this is the actual budget, 10,000 naira. But what's the variance? 10,000 naira. There has not been any change. As simple as that. For the month of January, it's going to be the same 10,000 naira, but nothing has been spent. So there's no variance, no change. As simple as that. So this is what we use for forecasting your next possible budget for the next year per se. So we expect that invariance by the time we start raising requisitions and approving them. Okay, so we're going back to just activate the budget. So as long as the budget is not yet active, you will see this button. So simply clicking on it and confirming activates the budget. Only when a budget is active, that's when requisition becomes active. So now that we have activated a budget, if we go to requisitions, we will find a plus button at the top right, right there. So we'll continue with this. Okay, so what if someone just brought in printing as a new item that needs a lot of budgeting around? And you know you have already activated a budget for the year, right? How do you handle that? Well, it's very simple. First of all, you might want to add the printing as a heading of its own, and then select the chart that you want it to be grouped under. That's the first part. The second part now will be to add it to that budget by clicking on the edit button against the particular budget of interest. Of course, it will always show you the current standing. And if you look at the current standing, you see that everything has already been spent. Everything that needs to be spent has already been spent. So how do you handle it? First things first, you might want to call up feeding and expenditure or telephony or any other one. But what you're actually looking out for is that one, the printing that has not been included. And then when you call it up, you should be able to give it its own margin, like maybe make an entry to it. When you make this entry, you notice that actually there is an overshoot. That overshoot is by 120,000 naira. This allows you to make a change in your approved budget. So you can easily come up here and say the budget is now 1,120,000. Very simple. So when you do this, the system pays attention to your changes right here. That is your new approved budget, right? And then takes cognizance of your new entries. That is the new additions that you just made. And of course, when it's saved, if you view it, you will see that it still balances out. So the estimated budget, the approved budget, and the balance will simply line up. So this is a very important aspect, editing an already created budget instance. And how do you remove or edit the one that you have already made an entry or over, like a listed budget item? How do you edit or remove it? Very simple. When you click on edit and it opens up, of course, here you can see the list of all the ones that you have already added. So let's say I want to remove legal fees. All I need to do is open this up, locate other administrative expenses that contains legal fees, and click on the checkbox to uncheck it. In which case, of course, we can see that we now have a balance of 200,000 naira. Or check it and reduce the balance, I mean the amount to 100,000. As simple as that. So at this point, maybe we want to make a few other changes. We want to move the 100,000 naira extra to something else. Maybe we want to move it from Lego and push it into stationery or printing because we gave printing too little, or share it between the printing and stationery. You understand the gist, right? So all you need to do is again open up the printing and stationery, change their vibes, maybe change this one to, instead of 120, change it to 180. And instead of 120 here, change it to 160. And you still have the balance spread out. So again, click on save and the system still maintains its quota. But the only thing that changes is the stationaries and their current costs. All right, enough of that. Let's go straight to the usage. So far you can see nothing happens here. And for us to start this in a very good tone, I want us to see a few things. One, this budget and expenditure is going to be spending, the spendings are going to come from our banks and petty cash, right? Or maybe we want to post them to liabilities and stuff like that. Whichever one that we want to use, it's up to us. But first of all, if you are spending, you need to already have a credit. And hitherto, we have already established how to maybe create the very first opening balance on our account numbers. Right now, we have one account number called Zenith Expense Bank, and the current balance is 1 million. We're going to pay attention to this 1 million even as our expenditure gets recorded. So let's go straight to requisitions. Requisitions is very simple to handle. Every member of your staff, if your staff team, can have access to requisitions, but it's usually more advised that your requisition be handled by people who are in accounts section, people who can actually cost an item. For those who cannot cost an item, we have a reserved pro forma for them. We call it request form. We will see how request form works. But right now, the focus is on requisitions. And every member who has access to requisitions will always have the My Requisitions tab active. But those who have pending, approved, rejected, awaiting active are the people who manage requisition schema. They are the ones who have these items active. And the license or the authority, the access to them is always given within the account setup and account operations permissions. All right, so back to requisitions. You see what I told you, we'll be going back and forth between some of these menus that we have already taken care of. So now you know where to give people access to approval, rejection, or authorization of requisitions. Approved requisitions go to awaiting authorization. And then when you authorize them, it all goes back to approved. So if you go to awaiting, you will not see them again. Rejected requisitions, of course, rejected requisitions tab. Pending are those ones that have not been either rejected, approved, or authorized. And what is authorization? Authorization simply means payout. As simple as that. Okay, so let's look at how to create a requisition pro forma. Very simple. Top right, plus button. That's it. So the moment you open it, the first thing that greets you is a space for entering the vouchers. Usually, a voucher will be a single paper with table that you enter the item, enter the amount, and then sign it off, close it, something like that. So, but that's not longer the case. In digital form, You simply make an entry. So right now we're going to print a proposal, right? So I'm going to just write proposal printing. That's what I want to request voucher for. And the price is 20,000 naira. Comment is if you have any remark. Yeah. So you can simply say printivo cost or printivo invoice, something like that. It's just a comment and you don't have to, it's not compulsory. But you have to select the account it belongs to. Now, this account is dependent on the chart of account that is currently active in the budget that we have created. So when we created this budget, we have electricity bill, stationery, and telephony, and food and drinks and printing. They will be the only accounts that is available right here. So if you look for maybe PHCN or NEPA bill or anything, you won't see it here because it's not part of the current active stage budget. That's what I told you at the beginning. So printing is of course under printing, so we add it to the list, and maybe we also have something like food and drinks, entertainment. So we want to add it as part of the voucher. Let's say that I'm still the one in charge of that. Then all I have to do is again feeding for two guests. I can just name it that, or just name it feeding and then put it 30,000 naira. And then in the comment, I say for two guests. That's all. So I've selected food and drinks and refreshments as the account name. So I just add it to the list. So now I have two items in the list in my voucher. If you look on the right hand side, the question is who is this requisition for? This is where you choose whether you are the one to be paid for this requisition, or you are raising this requisition or voucher for someone else. Maybe you are raising it up, you are raising it for the procurator, you are raising it for the kitchen staff, you are raising it for the personal assistant, but they don't have access to requisition pro forma. You are raising it on their behalf. Maybe they sent a request and you are raising the requisition. This is where you choose that. So if it's for you, for myself. If it's for others, you now decide whether it is for external or contract staff or for internal permanent staff. So if it is for someone who is still within the system, someone within your organization, it's an internal staff. So if you search here, the system will search the staff list. But if it is an external staff, then this is where you click and then you search for the person. If the person's name is not found amongst the list of the external staff that you found, you can actually click on this for new personnel. Let's say you have a new contract staff that is meant to handle this and you want to add the person quickly, just click here and then key the person's name. Let's say the name of the person is James and the designation is auditor, contract staff. You can find all the designations there. And then the email address, the phone number, and then the account details of the person. So here we're going to just put up a put up an account detail for James. Let's use GT Bank and let's use okay, and the system will definitely verify the account number. If it's valid, it will bring the name down there. So you set it here. Now what happens is when you set it, the system will get a pro forma of the person's full detail and have it pinned right here. The next thing is for you to just submit this. Now, during the submission, you can actually pick an invoice. If there is an invoice that is meant to be part of this pro forma, this particular request, you can send it in as part of this request. You don't have to do it separately, right? So you can actually click here, select the invoice in question. This take this to be a representation of an invoice, and then click submit requisition. So what really happens at this point is that the invoice will be submitted along with the requisition with the request you're about to send, right? So let's see. Okay, so we're going to submit this now by just clicking on submit requisition right here. And that's all we need to do. The system will take cognizance of that, give it a reference number, and then show you who requested it. As simple as that. Now, when you open it up, by either clicking on the reference date. It will show you again the full detail. This is requested for this particular person, James Nyelogo. But who requested it? Benjamin. It shows you the detail, it shows you the requisition category and everything. Within the auspice of this space, within this space, whoever is about to handle this particular requisition still has a window to change where the requisition belongs. Does it belong to printing really? Or is it a stationary requisition? Does this proposal belong to printing or is it so people can make mistake? The person who is submitting it can make a mistake of sending it to the wrong requisition category. It is here within your rights and available for you to simply click on it and then change it. So right now it is on stationery. I can change it back to printing and save. It's also within your reach to also adjust the amount. For instance, you can easily see quickly or at a glance that the requisition amount is 20,000 naira for printing of this proposal, but you have only available budget of 160,000. What if you don't want to spend that 20,000 naira? A simple discussion between you and the person can make you choose not to reject, rather edit this particular amount. And to edit it, all you need to do is click again the same pro forma and then change the price. So, like right now, I want to bring it down to 10,000 naira instead of 20,000 naira, and then I save it. So, this requisition, the admin or whoever is in charge of approving it has this amount of window to make modifications before the approval schema. Speaking of the approval schema, there are only two steps involved. One, check box the ones you want to approve. Two, click on the approve button. Now, anyone you don't check here will not be approved. So during the requisition pro forma, the system will check how much was requested and how much was approved. Dispensation will be only based on how much was approved. So right now, for the sake of simplicity, we are going to approve the two of them. So we expected to pay out a total of 40,000 naira to not Benjamin, but James, because this was raised for James. Now, if you have the right for authorization, you will always receive an authorization code like this one every morning or every day. So we'll see, we'll get to that part anyways. So here is the list of the items that we want to approve. We have clicked on the check boxes across the two of them. So now all we need to do is click on approve right here. So we check the two of them and then we click approve, confirm it, and then the system will mark it as approved. At that same instance of marking it as approved, the system will send out a notification to the person who made the request. So here it tells you, Benjamin, the requisition of 40,000 naira has been processed. The status is approved. If it is rejected, it will tell you status rejected. Simple. Now, for you, the admin, if you want to now dispense this amount, first of all, having raised this approval to this extent, if we come back to the list, first, under all, we will find the requisition. But if we go to pending, it's no longer there. If we go to approved, we will find it because it has been approved. But if we look at the payout of that table, the approval table, we will see that balance is 40 naira because 40,000 naira because paid out is still zero. If we go to rejected, it's not there. But if we go to awaiting, we will see it there because it is waiting, it's awaiting payout, it's awaiting authorization. So it's as simple as that. So all we need to do is click on any of the buttons to open the details again. And then if we have the right, the privilege to authorize this, two things would have happened by the time you open requisition pro forma. An authorization note would have been sent to you. That is this, the authorization code. So your job is to map it, copy it, or memorize it, whatever you do. But if you come to authorize, you will need to key in that authorization code in the authorization code box right here. But before we get to that, let's look at authorization source. This is a very important aspect. You can either choose to pay from bank or petty cash. Those are the two places where you can pay out for in petty cash. So let's use bank for simplicity right now. And the list of our banks, which hitherto we have created in our account numbers, will all show up here. So So you can easily say another name for account numbers is bank list. Okay. So here again we have um, Zenith Expense Bank. So we simply select that. Now, as you can see, the moment you select any of the banks, the balance on that bank in the ledger will always show up for you to know what you are dealing with. So we have a 1 million naira um, current balance on that Zenith Express Bank that we want to use. Then we have to choose whether we are paying manually or from our Switch app wallet. As you can see, there is a point here where you have the Switch app wallet showing up. That is if you have money in your wallet. Right now, there is 2.2 million naira in this wallet. So I can choose to pay automatically, which means I'll have to select Switch app as the payment mode. But right now, again, let's stick to manual. Let's make an assumption that we are going to make a transfer to this account number by logging onto our Zenith Bank app. That's what we are assuming. And what we are in that case, what this represents is simply the recording aspect of it, right? So we select the bank, we select manual payment, and then we have this space for keying in the payout amount. The payout amount is editable at this point. You can decide that you don't want to pay all the 40,000 naira at once. You want to pay maybe 20,000 now and pay 20,000 later, right? It's up to you. So if you want to do that, you can just key in the 20,000 naira here. Of course, our authorization code, we already got it from the mailbox. And then we simply click authorize, confirm, and the system will authorize it, that is pay out whatever amount that we have keyed in the box. So here you can see the payout history. The payout history allows you to see how much has been paid and what is the current balance. And this button, new payout, will always be available on this as long as there is still a balance after approval on this particular requisition pro forma. On that note, if we view our voucher by clicking the voucher, it opens up and you can see that first of all, it's been authorized. But more importantly, you can see that there is a payout balance of 20,000 naira. Oh, and by the way, if you are interested in seeing the current context of this particular requisition, maybe in the requisition schematics, you can actually scan this barcode. Maybe let's say you already have it printed out. You can actually scan this barcode in the multitude of all transactions that you have here. A single scan of the barcode will bring this requisition reference over here, and you can easily track the particular requisition pro forma and view more details about it. So there is no confusion. Even if you've printed this and given to your accountant or your PA or whoever, if you want to know the status, maybe they come back with a controversy or conflict, all you need to do is use your barcode scanner, scan the barcode. You don't need to even cram the reference number or anything. Just scan the barcode while you are on this box. While you are right here, scan the barcode and it will focus on the person's requisition, this particular requisition. Okay, so we have seen how to make a payout, part payout, whether full or part is basically the same thing. But where you have made a part payout, the system will still give you a button for new payout or that's continue complete the payment. And all you need to do again is just click on new payout, in which case you select again the bank of interest or where you want to pay out from, and then you do your normal selections. And then if you want to still cut it, you are free. You can still make it 12,000 naira. It's available. But let's say you started typing, but then you changed your mind. You have this button here to pay all that is currently the balance, pay all balance. And if you click on it, it will return to 20,000 naira. And then you enter your authorization code and you pay. Very simple. And now the requisition is completed and the payout button has disappeared. So this is very simple. For the sake of preview of what the report of this will look like, let's just look at the account numbers and see what happened to our money. See, right now we have only 960,000 naira left, which means we already have a drop of 40,000 naira. So the system, if you are paying attention to your expenditure, you will see that it's actually reducing the bank current balance. When the approved requisition is tiny, maybe you already have a benchmark, you can use petty cash. to knock it out. So for you to have petty cash in the first place, that means that you have actually moved some money from your expenditure account into the petty cash account. So usually, of course, petty cash is for little expenses. So how do you manage it in the first place? Our system fosters a menu for petty cash management right here. And all you need to do is open it, click on the plus button at the top right, and then fill up the information below. Fill up the form by selecting the bank you want to credit and then the amount you want to credit the bank. For instance, I want to credit this bank with 60,000 naira, and that will be for petty cash funding. So that means I'll have to debit the petty cash 60,000 naira. For the sake of ease of description, we have a button right here that you can click and it will use the money, the amount, and the bank of interest to generate a quick description for you. And then you can add a date and then also the reference. There is also a quick button here that can generate a reference for you. And then you confirm the petty cash crediting and debiting respectively. So the debit part of it will, of course, go to the petty cash transactions log, while the credit part will go to the bank, the expense bank. Now you have enough money within your petty cash to handle petty expenses. And now, how do you do that? Assume we already have one approved, like I showed you before. For the sake of time, I already added one and approved, and the money is just 2,000 naira. So this kind of money you can use petty cash to handle it. And how do you do that? Again, following the authorization schematics that we already saw, where you have to just go to your inbox, make sure that you have collected the authorization code, and use that to authorize this via petty cash. So make sure you can select the petty cash. Of course, the payout amount is here, and then you click on authorize and confirm that. That's all. So now, definitely, this money will be dispensed or recorded as dispensed from petty cash. Of course, if we go back to the list, usually we'll have this authorization source below the authorized by. That's how you know how any particular payment was made. For instance, this one, the last known source was the Remember primary account, while this one is petty cash. And that's it. All right. So now, what of the budget? How does all this culminate to the budget schematics that we set in the first place for these expenditure to be recorded in? Well, if we go back to budget management, we will find that the 1 million naira, 1,120,000 naira that we estimated is already being spent. So right now we have an actual spending of 42,000 naira. And if you click on view, then it shows you the budget summary. From the budget summary, you can see that stationery and legal fees are yet to be spent on, but telephone and refreshments and printing, they have already been expended on. So and then the system will show you their current balance in terms of the budget that was set for them. Of course, you can download this, but more importantly, let's look at the variance analysis so far. So the variance analysis, for instance, will show you for every individual item in the list. This is the budgeted amount. First of all, it gives you the general budget variance, and it shows you for in each month of the full year. Of course, that's 12 months. The split budget. You made a budget of 1,120,000 naira. The system will split it into 12 and show you the monthly budget. And the monthly budget, as you can see here, is 93,333, from which 42,000 has been spent, leaving you with basically 51,000 naira to spend for the month. For others, everything is still the same. So now, if you follow this and bring down a variance for December, it will simply show you that on a forecast level, that you actually overshot what you should have, um, as assuming that this is the only thing that we spent in December for this year, and then we moved over to January. It means that we actually had an overshoot. First of all, we budgeted 93,000, but the only thing that was spent was 42,000, leaving us with a budget variance of 51,000, right? So the forecast is that we have a 14,000 naira window for December, right? And then the forecast variance is 28,000 naira. Mathematicians know this one. They will understand that. But this is how the system will give you for each one of the months for the split of 1 year budget from that your base. From that your 1.2, 1.12 million. Of course, it goes ahead to also give you the same thing in terms of items. So it shows you electricity bill individually, stationery individually, telephone, everything individually. For instance, telephone now, your budget for a month, the month of December is 33,000 naira, and so far you have spent 2,000 naira. So, though you already have 1 year budget, the system also has a way of using this to kind of spread out on monthly basis what is expected to be spent for a particular month for a particular item. So, and you can have that all the way from the beginning of your budget opening to the end of that expected end of that budget opening, which is 1 year. So that's how the various schematics currently looks like. Okay, next we are going to look at the other ways of bringing in contents to these requisitions. I mentioned it before, the request form. So the request form basically is the same thing. It functions basically the same way as requisitions, but it's available to those who, like I mentioned, are not really open to creating requisitions directly. Rather, they raise voucher and then accountant will create requisitions for them. So let's set up for one of such case scenario. So just like requisition, you can see it has all pending items approved and the rejected ones. So the context is basically the same thing. The only difference is that in request form, you don't impute money. So let's see how, let's use one for example. So a request form can a request form item type can be either normal or store item. If it's a store item, then that means that maybe you are making a request from store, as simple as that. In which case, you will have to select an item that comes from the store. And if you do that, then the system will send this request to the store, not to the requisition performer. Right now, because we're handling requisition, we use normal item. Now, what is the item you are actually interested in? Let's say broom. You don't know how much they sell broom. You just want it. Now, is it for a student or for a staff? If it's for a student, then the system will ask you to select the student in question. But if it's a staff or others, you just leave it as it is. And then what's the quantity you need? You need 3 bunches of broom or 3 sets of broom, stuff like that. And then you can simply say 4 classrooms, something like that. Just include it. And then you set the priority. Is this something that is very urgent? Then you submit the request. When you submit this request, whoever is in charge of approving it will receive this request and then either reject or approve it. You can also open it up to see the contents, and when you open it up to see the contents, you can also approve or reject from there. So let's just go ahead and approve this request. Now, when you approve a request, that request becomes available for action. So what I mean by action is that when such request is made, if it's a store type of request, the the notification will be sent to the storefront for for um, operations. That's for processing. But if it's a normal, if it's a normal, um, If it's a normal invoice, if it's a normal request, first of all, the system will give you the reference and then it will show you the current fulfillment status, requisition pending. Now, because requisition is pending, if you go over to requisitions and you say you want to raise a new requisition, the system will give you list of request forms that are currently pending, and you can see broom is pending. It's a request that was placed by someone. You can now make it part of your requisition, add price to it. For instance, you can now say 300 or 3,000 as the case may be. You can see the comments here, and then you select where it belongs to. So if it belongs to food and drinks, legal fees, stationery, of course it's a stationery bid, and then you add that to the list, and then you submit it as a requisition. And then the admins or whoever is in charge of requisition pro forma will take it on from here. It's as simple as that. So now the this is just showing you how request form gets to have a handshake with requisition proceeds. Of course, now that it has been added to requisitions, if you come back to my request or just go to request forms, you see that the fulfillment is already changed to requisition raised. Okay, so and that's basically all about that. Now let's look at this now. It's currently pending, and I want to use this opportunity to also show us a different way of approving this requisition, which is by using which is using Switch app. If you have your salary schematics set up and you set your expenditure to use Switch app, it's also very simple. Again, go through the approval schematics. It's basically the same thing as ever. But when you get to authorization, you select bank. But instead of using your normal, apart from selecting your normal expenditure bank, instead of using manual, you can switch to Switch app. And if you use Switch app, then the payout amount that you're interested in expending here will be paid out from Switch app. So if we again check get our authorization code like we got in previous contexts and apply it on the authorization code box, then clicking authorize and processing the authorization will actually send this money direct to the bank in question, this particular bank that was selected in this account details automatically. Though there'll be no two ways about that. The system will send it automatically, like send it as real cash. Okay, so that's about all that. Now there are times that you want to record an expenditure that was not covered by budgeting and requisition. Our system still allows that, but you do it using direct posts. And direct post expenditure recording is actually very simple. Again, it has basically the same dashboard or the same schematics like the ones that we have seen before in requisitions and request form. All pending, approved, rejected, and my postings. So at the starter level, there is no direct posting here, and all it requires is for you to again plus button at the top right, and then it gives you the schema for making the posting. So usually in this schema, we are interested as of this moment on expenditure posting, not ledger posting. So later on, we'll look at ledger posting and the difference between the two of them. But we are focusing currently on expenditure posting. So on expenditure posting, what you require is first the description of what the expenditure is all about. For instance, maybe it's something that has to do with the electricity bill. We don't have any coverage for electricity bill, but now we want to pay it maybe because we've received an invoice. So electricity bill, 200,000 naira, for example, and then the account that you want to bill for this. Again, you must have maybe electrical expenses, So, and then reference number you can always generate by clicking here. Posting date you can always get pick up from here. And then the source, is it bank or petty cash? If it's bank, which bank? Again, you see we have basically the same context that we would have in requisition pro forma. And then you add that to list. So the difference between these and what you have in requisitions is that requisitions will require you to have all those processes of approve, remit, and then it depends on budget. But this one, though it has approval and all, there is no remittance and it's not part of the budget. You just had an expenditure that you want to have a record of within the system. So again, the account the account chart is the account that will be a year that will be debited for this particular expenditure record, and the bank or the source will be the bank or petty cash. Definitely, most of the time that will be credited for this particular effect. So with that, of course, you can make as many entries as you want, and then submit them all at once by just submitting to posting. Do you want to approve upon submission? This one is in cases where the person who is submitting is also the admin, in which case there is no need for going for the third party. That's the second level of approval. So you can actually click on approve upon submission. And then when you submit it, there will be no need of going for approval. And that's it. So, but if you want to approve, if you want to do the approval differently, then approve upon submission should be turned to no. Now, if there are invoices or if there is an invoice, just if there is even if there are invoices, you might want to create a collage of all the invoices, or you can always submit like we saw in requisitions pro forma. You can actually submit an invoice, maybe a picture of something. Yeah, submit the invoice, and then let's upload the invoice and then submit posting. So when you do this kind of submission, yes, first of all, it will be approved automatically because you clicked on approve automatically. But basically, this is how to make a direct post expenditure. This is how to record an expenditure directly. The beautiful thing is that this same posting, this kind of posting also affects or takes effect on your account. So that particular account that you selected will also be depleted as a result of your posting in direct post. If it was petty cash will also be credited. For instance, right now petty cash is 58,000 naira balance, right? After the last transaction. So if I run a new direct post and this time around, let's say I posted an 8,000 naira and offline bill of 8,000 naira, and then the account, of course, as usual, is maybe something that has to do with internet or administrative expenses, but the reference is here and the date is today. And then instead of bank, I select petty cash, add to list, and again click on approve upon submission, submit it. What you notice is that it will come in again like the electricity bill came in, but instead of recording anywhere else, it will actually record the credit on petty cash right there. Direct posting, offline bill with the reference number and everything else, reducing the money from 58,000 naira to 50,000 naira. Okay, so that is direct posting for you. As simple as that. Though the direct posting as of this moment harbors both the expenditure posting like we have seen and the ledger posting. We won't talk about the ledger posting now until later when we are looking at reporting generally. But it's basically the same thing. But here you have this extended play on posting that does not necessarily have to be all about expenditure, even though it is still direct posting. So inside direct posting, the part that we just took care of is the part that has to do with expenditure. Okay. So the next on the expenditure right is the payroll schema. Worthy of note is the fact that the payroll is one of the rare occasions or one of the rare schema where account has a handshake with the HR module, in the sense that the payroll is actually an embodiment of the individual pay slips of your staff, which usually is a makeup of their salary schematics. So currently, we are looking at one person's salary or personnel information by name Jacinta, whose current salary is 20,000 naira. And we are expecting that when payroll is processed for the personnel in question, that we will see a pay slip that contains a payable of 20,000 naira. So let's go ahead. The setup of the salary schematics is beyond the scope of this particular training. In our HR tutorial, we have that extensively covered. To get payroll badge, to create a payroll badge, the system goes into the HR module, finds the salary schematics of every personnel in your list, this particular list, and then when the system gets their salary, it uses it to form pay slips for them. And those pay slips will definitely reside in payslip history when approved. Okay, so we see all that in a moment. So this is Jacinta's salary schematics, and if you open it in details view, you will see that it contains only basic salary. A different person may contain basic salary, housing allowance, and all that. The HR, that's their own jurisdiction. So right now, let's focus on what pay slips will look like when payroll is generated. So to generate a payroll, all you need to do again is to click the payroll create payroll batch button at the top right. The month and the year are used to form a description for this particular batch. A payroll batch encompasses multiple pay slips. That is the pay slip, all the valid pay slips of all your personnel, all your employees, right? So a logical thing to do after selecting the particular month of interest and the year of interest would be to simply click on generate. So when you do that, the system goes all the way back to the salary schematics of every individual and then pulls all their pay slips, all their salary components, use it to form a pay slip, and then bring them all to a single payroll batch. Right here, you can see the total approved, total payable of 57,982. Because all of them are currently pending, we have them also as possible approved payable right there. The system also shows you the total payable salary, the basic salary that was generated, the total allowance, the total deductions that were generated from that total of 659 personnel's invoices or personnel's salary pay slips, right? So what you're looking at now is as malleable as you can as it can be. You can choose to re-edit this batch. You can choose to view details or view details cluster. The difference between details and details cluster is that details will show you again summary table, but cluster will show you the individual payment components that are part of every salary. So we'll see both of them so that we understand when and how to use each one of them. So this is a basic summary that we are currently opening. And when it loads, you will see that it contains precise, concise information concerning every individual in the payroll batch. Yeah, so right there, you can see Benjamin and every other person. If we're interested in, for instance, Jacinta, we can always search the box and definitely we'll see it focused on Jacinta with a 20,000 naira payable, while every other person, based on what the system saw in your salary schematics, the system generates your payslip accordingly. Now, if we are looking at the if we are looking at the details cluster, It won't give us just the summary, it will give us the individual item components of that salary, of that particular pay slip. Yes, so here you see things like basic salary and then the allowances and then the deductions. So the allowances are housing, transport, and refund. And you can see that it's not everybody that has that. The only person in this on this page that has it is Omosami, while the Samo Omosami also has contributions and pay as you earn. So you see a more detailed breakdown when you use the cluster, right? Now let's go about processing this particular payroll batch. So the first thing you want to do is to go through them. I mean, the system has done its job, especially given your setup in the payslip. As long as it is correct, the system will do the correct thing. But a human eye is also pertinent because we are talking about money here. So most of the time, you will find some people, maybe they have already, maybe there is a particular reason, maybe someone has already collected the salary in advance and finished everything without actually going through the system. You might want to reject the person's payslip or even reduce the number. So it's all to your discretion, but you need to review and approve or reject the payslips of interest. So here on this list, we have Benjamin, Sarah, and everybody else. So there is a checklist, there's a checkbox right above the beside the serial number, right above on the table. Clicking on it selects every pay slip here, and you can approve all selected or reject all selected. Right now, I'm going to click on reject selected, and then I'm going to also use the individual checkboxes to approve one or two or three, and we'll see how that looks like. So here we go, one, two, three, and approve selected. So we see only those three will be approved. I can also use the individual buttons right here to approve a selected one and then also to reject a particular payslip. It's as simple as that. So that's about it. That's about it. And now, if you want to also see the breakdown of a particular pay slip, apart from being able to see their summary, again, you have the details right there, and the single click will show you a pay slip. That's it. As simple as that. If you want to print it, be my guest. Just click on print button at the bottom, and you get it. The same whenever a pay slip is generated for an individual, depending on the admin setup, whether you want pay slips to go to their inbox or not, the system will send such mail. Now let's go about processing it. To process a payroll that you have taken care of all the approval schematics, you use the third button on the list, which is the process payroll. Or you can simply, of course, you will always need to process it, but sometimes you might just want to download. If you want to handle this offline, then you might want to download it in Excel sheet and then pass it on to your bank by as an instruction. The system will be able to give you that also. But whether you are doing that or not, every pay slip, every payroll batch that you generate after due diligence, you need to process it so that the system will take cognizance of the numbers and record them in the right ledger, right? So on that note, we can see the summary of this batch that we have generated. You can see the reference and then the total approved slips. No matter how many they are, the approved ones are the ones that will be paid for. So though we have 57.9 million net payable, net approved payable is just 598,000, and that's the one that the system will take care of when it goes to your whether switch app or bank. If you're using switch app, it means you want to do an outright payment using the automated wallet system. But if you want to do offline, that means you just want to create a record right here. Now, I've taken the liberty to reset our current Zenith Bank, the one that we're using for expenditure, reset it back to 1 million so that we can see it deplete on the record of just payroll as an expenditure. So, on that note, the system will still give you a note of warning Processing with offline or bank presumes that you are sending or that you have sent the approved payroll to your service bank manually. Therefore, all we are now doing is recording paperless within the system. So, if the system requires your password as an admin in this context, and all that you have to do is key it in right here and pass it on. So here right now, I'm going to just type my admin password and click on process right there. So, and then confirm that, and the system will process this particular payroll using the offline schematics. And the only ones that will be processed from here are the ones that have been approved, which is a total of 598,600. Of course, by the time we get to reports, we'll see how everything reflects in the ledger. But for a quick review, a quick overview, if we go to our list of account numbers and check the one that we're using for expenditure, we'll see that we now have only a balance of 401,400. So the last on the list is the expenditure from salary advance. So we've already dealt with payroll. Now salary advance is right there. And for anybody who wants to fill up a salary advance request, it's very simple. Again, plus button at the top right, and then you just fill the information right there. That's the amount and the tenor, and then your reason for needing it, and then you submit application. So we are looking at these two that have already been submitted, and we're going to focus on this particular person, or Moyola. So Moyola has a request for 400,000 naira with, and it is currently pending. So if we click on details right there, we see the breakdown of the request. The basic salary for Omoyola is currently 200,000 naira, and he's making a request of salary advance of 100,000 naira, which he intends to pay off in 4 months, which means four different times. Otherwise, I mean, which means this 100,000 naira should be split into four different places. That's 25,000 each month, and depleted or deducted from his salary. If you want to reject it, here it is. But we are going on with approval so that we see how the expenditure gets placed within the system. So all we need to do is click approve and then proceed to authorize. Of course, for authorization sake, there will be need for us to, just like we have in requisitions, there will be need for our normal, our usual now, that's our key. So again, all we need to do is get our key from, because definitely by now you ought to have been sent authorization code in your inbox. If you haven't, you can always request. So, but let's hope that we already have it in our inbox. So, all we need to do is just go to the inbox, pick it up, and continue with the process. All right. So, speaking of the process, all we need to do here now is just again click on the view details. And since we have already done approval, it moves over to authorization level. And whoever is in charge of authorization will simply do our usual, just select the payment option. Are you paying with Switch app or are you paying with bank? If you're paying with bank, again, Zenith Bank. If you're paying with Switch app, authorization is dispensation. But if you are paying with bank in this context, then you will have to also run a manual payout. You will have to do your manual payout. But let's go through the authorization. So we fill up the bank that we want to use, and then we click authorize. So when you click authorize, the system will of course give you the printout of that particular pay slip. This is the salary advance slip, and you can see the reference number. You can see the where it's marked to be paid from, Zenith Bank Expense Bank. That's Zenith Expense Bank. So you already know. And then you can see who authorized it and all the other details. Okay, so this is printable. You can just print it for your staff. Now that it's been authorized, the next thing is to actually dispatch payout. Dispatch payout means to actually record, in this context now, is to record that you have made the payment. So if you dispatch payout, that's all you need to do. Just come to this place, click on it, and the system will mark it as paid out. So anytime you come over here again, it will be just the information and whether it's been disbursed or not. Okay. Now, let's now look at what happens when you generate a payroll for this Omoyola. So what we see in the payroll, that is how the system actually gets the money back. Let's say this is January and you are generating a payroll for January batch. So January 2025 and generate. So our interest is in what happens to Omoyola's slip when when this payroll is generated. You may not have to process it, but let's see what happens to Omoyola's account when this payroll is processed. The payroll is generated. You can see for Omoyola, that the amount that he's supposed to receive drops from 200,000 naira to 175, which means that there is an embargo of 25,000 naira. Let's see how the system records that in the pay slip. So this is the pay slip. Basic salary is already there, 200,000 naira. So the total net that he was supposed to take is just that 200,000 naira. But then there is a salary advance repayment of 120 for of 25,000 naira. That is the first tenor of the four tenors that we are approved for him, and that is 25,000 naira here, which gives you a net pay of just 175,000 naira. Of course, this is printable as usual, but the main thing is to see that it is properly recorded. Okay, meanwhile, as of the payouts, the money balance, of course, dropped from 401,000 to 301,000 at the point of disbursement. So you need to also see that as the source of expenditure that we incurred in the Zenith Bank, in the Zenith Expense Bank.